You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Tuesday, 18th of November 2014. Convicted drug users and thieves will be allowed to join police, rules relaxed in bid to lure minorities, and London is already recruiting criminals. NHS doctor before his trial for assault flees UK to join Taliban in Pakistan. Dyfed-Powys Police amongst worst at reporting crimes, while Hampshire police fail to record 40% of crimes. Cambridge police leaflets claiming AIDS is God's punishment for gays and not a crime. Putin, US wants to subdue Russia, but no one did or ever will. Thought for the day, thought I'd heard it all. And finally, a joke to insult everybody. Now, before we start, I would like to apologise on behalf of Radio Britain for the absence of The World at 8 yesterday Monday without notice to our listeners. I had an appointment in town and I thought we'd be back in time to do the news, but got delayed and it turned into a me day, which was long overdue. So here we are Tuesday and we will be with you again Friday as normal with more of Nick Griffin. UK news. Convicted drug users and thieves will be allowed to join police. Rules relaxed in bid to lure minorities, and London is already recruiting criminals, the Mail on Sunday reported. Britain's biggest force is already recruiting those who have been on the wrong side of the law in a controversial attempt to increase race diversity. Convicted criminals will be allowed to join the police under plans to relax strict entry rules that critics fear will undermine standards. For the first time, candidates will be considered if they have convictions, cautions or fines for offences likely to include possession of cannabis or shoplifting. It can also be revealed that all forces across England and Wales will be encouraged to adopt softer rules on who should be ruled out from becoming a police officer. The College of Policing, which sets standards for the profession, is to publish a code of practice in the new year on the vetting of would-be police officers. It will set out a relaxation of the current rules, which ban anyone with previous convictions, cautions or fines in all but the most exceptional circumstances, on the grounds that it is keeping potentially valuable people from becoming police officers. Instead, the college will tell police chiefs they can take on applicants with criminal pasts as long as they're open about what they did. Those guilty of relatively minor offences, particularly those committed several years ago and which resulted in light sentences, are likely to be let in to forces. Applicants who try and hide what they did or committed serious crimes involving violence, sex offences or fraud will continue to be barred from a career in uniform. World at 8. I still have not heard anything so sad in my life. Why are the rules being relaxed? To deal with similar types of idiots in civilian life? Years ago a man had to be a certain height, weight and type. Now anything goes and it shows. Our police will soon be the most diverse and odd variety of no-hopers, but all will of course be ethnic. NHS doctor before his trial for assault flees United Kingdom to join Taliban in Pakistan. A British surgeon who was due to stand trial for assault has fled the country and become a senior leader of the Taliban in Pakistan. Mirza Tariq Ali, 39, who practiced in the NHS, evaded the UK authorities despite having his passport taken from him while awaiting trial at the Old Bailey. He resurfaced last week in a recruitment video for a Taliban splinter group urging foreign jihadists to join him. The doctor has become a mouthpiece for the terrorist organisation and under a new name, Dr Abu Obaida al-Islamabadi has begun publishing an English-language jihadist magazine online aimed at recruiting Muslim youths from the West. Ali, who lived in Walthamstow, East London, arrived in Britain in 2004, having previously been a doctor in the Pakistan Army. He worked shifts as a locum surgeon in London and Cambridge, having trained at a London teaching hospital. Police and security services are now facing embarrassing questions over how he was able to flee. The surgeon is one of a growing number of known extremists who have skipped bail or surveillance to wage holy war abroad. World at 8. Well, one can hardly call him a homegrown, can they? It just shows what we allow in the country nowadays and also allow out. Send all young Muslim men out to fight and send their families home to Pakistan or where they came from, and we won't have any of these problems. Dyfed-Powys Police amongst worst at reporting crimes, while Hampshire Police failed to record 40% of crimes. HM Inspectorate of Constabulary said the failure to record crime properly was indefensible. Dyfed-Powys Police is ranked one of the 4 worst performing forces in the UK for crime reporting, while neighbouring South Wales Police is one of the best. More than 800,000, or 1 in 5, of all crimes reported in England and Wales each year are not being recorded, said the Inspectorate of Constabulary. Hampshire Constabulary said some crimes, which previously would have been investigated first and then recorded, were now being recorded immediately. The level of crime not recorded by Hampshire Police was more than double the national average, branded indefensible during a sample taken in an inspection. The force was found not to record 40% of crime in a sample of incidents taken by HM Inspectorate of Constabulary, more than double the average of 19%. The force said it was already changing the way it recorded crime, but suggested this was partly because of cuts. Detective Superintendent Rachel Farrell said, "This has been unnecessary as we cut back office staff in order to keep as many officers as possible on the front line. The HMIC audit has been timely. It comes partway through our change and highlights specific areas where we need to improve." HMIC carried out an inspection of crime data in all police forces in England and Wales, during which it took a random sample of incidents and looked at which ones should be counted as crimes and how many the force had actually recorded. It concluded that 112 incidents in Hampshire were crimes, but only 67 had been recorded. Well, to date. It would be interesting to know what sort of crimes these are relating to in which areas. Cuts should not affect doing one's job, but are just an excuse. More likely is that many of these crimes are undertaken by foreigners and we cannot even find them, let alone arrest them. Cambridge Police leaflets claiming AIDS is God's punishment for gays are not a crime. Pink News reports Cambridgeshire Police have said that leaflets claiming that homosexuality is linked to paedophilia fall short of any criminality. Extremist homophobic leaflets have been repeatedly distributed in the area and across the country in the past year. One religious leaflet titled The Work of Darkness was delivered last month by a man in a cape wearing a hooded robe thing. It claims that trans people are possessed by demons, that gays want to abolish the age of consent, and that AIDS is God's judgment for gay people. However, after the leaflet surfaced yet again this week, Cambridgeshire Police said they won't take action because it's apparently not a crime. A spokesperson told Eli News leaflets of a homophobic nature were distributed in Cambridge earlier this year. Additionally, similar material has been distributed in other areas of the country, and indeed the country. Whilst it is acknowledged that many recipients will be offended by the leaflet's content, Article 10 of the European Convention of Human Rights gives individuals the right to freedom of expression, the right to hold opinions and to receive and impart information and ideals without interference by public authority. This includes opinions which may offend, irritate, shock or disturb. While the material being distributed earlier this week will in many cases offend, irritate, shock or disturb, the content, context and actions of the male concerned fall short of any criminality at this time. We will, however, continue to monitor the situation both locally and nationally. Anyone who is approached or receives any of this of literature should contact police by calling 101. World at 8. Now, if someone were to do leaflets saying that immigration should be stopped and repatriation started, this would be a crime. I don't see the difference, frankly. European news. There is no European news today. World news. Putin, US wants to subdue Russia, but no one did or ever will. The US has no plans to humiliate Russia, but instead wants to subdue it, Russian President Vladimir Putin has said, adding that no one had ever succeeded in doing so and never will. Speaking at a forum of the All Russia People's Front in Moscow today, the Russian leader said that history was not about to change and that no one would manage to suppress the country. Throughout history, no one has ever managed to do so towards Russia and no one ever will, Putin said. Responding to a question about whether America was trying to humiliate Russia, Putin disagreed, saying the US wanted to solve their problems at our expense. Putin also argued that common Western values might have shifted and the term should not be overused. Democracy does not provide rights for a coup and genocide, he said. Putin met with Abbott in Brisbane. Despite the focus on the world economy, the crisis in Ukraine was one of the hottest topics at the G20. Talking about the summit's results at a press conference, US President Barack Obama did not announce any significant changes in his country's approach to Russia. "We would prefer a Russia that is fully integrated with the global economy," the US President told a news conference, adding that his country was also very firm on the need to uphold core international principles. Before leaving Brisbane, Putin said that a solution to the crisis in eastern Ukraine was possible. "Today, the situation in Ukraine, in my view, has good chances for resolution, no matter how strange it may sound," he said, as quoted by Reuters. The Russian leader also said he was satisfied with both the results and the atmosphere of the meeting. Australian authorities created an exceptionally friendly atmosphere for discussing solutions to economic challenges at the G20 summit in Brisbane, the Russian president said, dispelling rumours that there were any confrontations. "World at 8, you've gotta love Putin. White, Christian and a nationalist." Where he said about the media hype and he had better things to do at home, and then Obama started his speech on not invading other countries, I nearly collapsed. That's all the US and the West have been doing for years. It's somewhat hypocritical, isn't it? Thought for the day. Thought I'd heard it all. Well, as this title says, I'm surprised, as I thought I had heard and read all the crap there was to read on the Gurkhas, and indeed have been merrily slanging them off ever since Lumley got her teeth into that particular and unnecessary battle. And here we have Lumley's Legacy of Misery by David Jones in the Saturday's Daily Mail. It was strange to see a national with a double-page spread on what I've been saying for the last few years on the World at 8, and indeed been pilloried by my own now ex-party in doing so. The fact that their chairman of the veterans wing of the BNP made an abject apology for me a little while ago on the main website now sits very heavily on just how wrong the BNP have got it. My criticisms, like the Mail, do not just whitewash the whole sorry affair and put all the onus on the Nepalese. I'm sure they are a wonderful band of people who can piss and shit all around their own country, but I do take exception at them doing it in my country, and moreover my part of this small and overcrowded island. Jones quite rightly centres on the sheer numbers of Nepalese who have come over and are still coming over here, and it must be apparent now to even the most fervent army guy that many of these are elderly people from extended clans, who are here because in truth entire villages of Nepal are now empty, and I am not joking. The present Nepalese government is communist, and even they, whilst wanting to get rid of their elderly who will become a problem to them in the future, are trying to stop the flow of British pension holders to the UK. Why? Because in a country like Nepal, living is virtually cheap, and a British pension over there can mean the difference between having a workable village and not. And no government wants to lose pensioned people. True, they are losing the pain of having to educate them and provide certain facilities, but as we know, many of the Nepalese who have come to the UK are still living in the Dark Ages and are bringing their habits, good and bad, but mostly bad, over to the United Kingdom. Jones highlights Aldershot, and it was on the bus to Aldershot from Farnborough my text on the pissing elderly Nepalese who thought nothing of just peeing where she sat. Now, apart from the socially unacceptable view of this in Western life, is the disease factor on a bus with members of all ages on it. It is simply not to be put up with. But we have to, and in Hampshire especially, we are now overrun with people from Nepal, many of which do not have relatives at present in our army. Entire streets and shops are now Nepalese for the Nepalese, who make money out of takeaways and restaurants, who cater to the slovenly Brits who cannot be bothered to cook, or who are so busy making money to pay the taxes which fund these parasites in their health and education in the United Kingdom that they have to eat takeaway dog. It's well known my view on the Nepalese, having seen firsthand many years ago what would and did happen. I'm surprised that the Mail didn't jump on this sooner, but of course, like many subjects which were taboo a couple of years ago, this problem has been allowed to grow in proportion along with immigration in the EU, both subjects which will and are becoming more acceptable not to be happy with. So for that, thank you for at last printing something not along the lines of poor old Gurkhas in wheelchairs with a failing actress who is busy resuscitating her career. The problem lies in the fact that although elderly, when many come here with their numerous relations, they all seem to be able to afford houses and cars and businesses which would be better suited to help them in their own country and not in our country. But of course we have for the time being in the UK the best thing in the world, and that is our NHS, which is now struggling to cope with hordes of migrants of every description pouring in and living in this country. And the Nepalese elderly will, whether we like it or not, take precedence over our own elderly and the old of the first migrants from 50 years ago. You can see them now tottering along in full national dress along the corridors of Hampshire and Surrey hospitals, which have also taken to employ them as so-called nurses. Now, not being a racist bastard, I don't have a problem with an ethnic nurse or doctor if I feel they know what they're doing and can speak English, so that at least I know that they know and can tell me what the matter is. But in my last sojourn earlier this year, the Filipino nurses were good at English, but the Nepalese were terrible and didn't really seem to care at all. But if you take in millions from Nepal, you're going to need hundreds of nurses who can speak their language, aren't you? So sod the Brits, mate. I've heard tales of school bullying from gangs of Nepalese in the local Aldershot and Farnborough schools, Nepalese gangs roaming around Aldershot after dark causing local trouble, and neighbours who wish they had never heard of the Gurkhas or their offspring. None, of course, of which is reported or commented on. Rather like the Muslim sexual grooming, which is still being put down to a small Asian minority by Avzia Nasal, the Nepalese remain sacrosanct and untouched and still coming over. Now, however, we have the problem that they don't like being here. Their money doesn't stretch in the UK. So, sucks boo to the greedy bastards, and they should take themselves home to their own empty villages, start businesses and start to build up their lives in their own country, not to be a blot on the landscape in ours. The ones who were actually in the army were mercenaries, and since when did any country take in the family of mercenaries? Not since the Romans, I believe. No, we need to put Lumley's people firmly back in Nepal, make a present of them to their government, take back our old pubs and restaurants, clean out our buses, likewise our schools, help our GPs fill their lists with us Brits instead of strangers with odd diseases and habits, and do it of course gently so as not to upset them. We were full 40 years ago. We didn't need the Pakistanis and Indians from Kenya. We didn't need the Hong Kong Chinese. We didn't need the Africans, North Africans and Arabs, and we certainly don't need an obscure, odd tribal people from a small rocky country at the fag end of India. We really don't, and if this sorry story is in the mail, then it has reached the ears of the establishment, who no doubt will find an old white guy who was groped an octogenarian many years ago, or a Nepalese hero from Afghanistan. Oh, I give up. Remember, perhaps the male writers do listen to the World at 8. And finally, how Moses got the 10 Commandments. One day God went to the Arabs and said, "I have some commandments for you that will make your lives better." The Arabs asked, "What are commandments?" And the Lord said, "They are rules for living." "Can you give us an example?" "Thou shalt not kill." "Not kill? We're not interested." So he went to the blacks and said, "I have some commandments." The blacks wanted an example, and the Lord said, "Honour thy father and thy mother." "Father? We don't know who our fathers are. We're not interested." Then he went to the Mexicans and said, "I have some commandments." The Mexicans also wanted an example, and the Lord said, "Thou shalt not steal." "Not steal? We're not interested." Then he went to the French and said, "I have some commandments." The French too wanted an example, and the Lord said, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." "Not commit adultery? We're not interested." Finally, he went to the Jews and said, "I have some commandments." "Commandments," they said. "How much are they?" "They're free." "Well, we'll take 10. There, that should offend just about everybody. You've been listening to The World at 8. I'm Lynn Mozart, and I wish you all a very good night.